Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the ultimate late-night mystery, why you just can't stop eating, even when you're completely, maybe even uncomfortably full. I'm really pumped to walk you through this because what we're going to uncover today, it's a total game changer for how we look at our daily habits. We're going to dig into the science of taste, a bit of human survival history, and most importantly, the hidden mechanisms operating inside the modern food industry. So, picture this. It's 10 p.m., you're chilling on the couch, watching TV, and you tell yourself, okay, I'm just gonna have 3 chips, or just 1 slice of pizza, right? We've all been there. You reach into the bag, you eat 1, then another, and then poof. 10 minutes later, you're staring down into a totally empty bag. You're sitting there with greasy fingers, a whole lot of confusion, and this heavy dose of guilt. Instantly, you start beating yourself up, blaming your lack of self-control or your weak willpower. Well, let's stop right there, because here is the counterintuitive twist that literally changes everything. You didn't fail a test of character, your willpower isn't broken. Actually, your brain fell into a highly sophisticated artificial biological trap. Think about it. When you're sitting on that couch, you're trying to fight hundreds of thousands of years of deeply ingrained human survival wiring, and you're trying to do it using nothing but a 10-minute decision-making process. Honestly, it's a completely rigged game. So let's look at part 1, your brain on evolution. To understand what's happening, we have to look at this massive historical mismatch we're living through. For literally 99% of human history, calories were incredibly scarce. Starvation wasn't just some vague concept. It was a constant, everyday threat for our ancestors. But then, boom, the mid-20th century hits, and the Industrial Food Revolution changes everything overnight. We suddenly figured out how to strip foods of their filling fiber and water, leaving behind nothing but hyper-concentrated macronutrients. In a blink of an eye, we went from a world of total caloric scarcity to this sudden explosion of cheap, easily available calories. Now, think about how our ancestors actually navigated their environment. Out in nature, finding sweetness was a huge evolutionary win. Imagine an early human foraging in a dense forest and stumbling upon a beehive full of wild honey, or a bush just bursting with ripe berries. What did that sweetness actually mean to them? Well, it signaled 2 vital things. First, high, dense energy, and second, safety. See, sweet plants in nature are almost never toxic, whereas bitter plants, those often carry a really high risk of being poisonous. So our brains became hardwired to actively seek out and heavily reward the discovery of sugar. And the hidden mechanism behind that reward? It's something called the dopamine engine. When you eat sugar or fat, a specific region in your brain called the nucleus accumbens just floods with dopamine. But here's the crazy part, and it's a huge misconception. This dopamine rush didn't evolve to make you feel happy. Nope. It evolved as an urgent neurochemical bookmark. It was basically designed to scream at your primal brain, hey, remember exactly where you found this rare calorie-dense food and eat every single bite of it right now before it rots or another animal steals it. It's a survival imperative, not a joyride. Which brings us to part 2, engineering the bliss point. High sugar, high fat, high salt. In the natural world, those 3 elements almost never exist together in the same food. Our ancestors only ever found them separately and always in really small quantities. But today, food engineers actively combine these 3 elements into this unnatural triad. They mix them in exact mathematically calculated ratios that are relentlessly designed to trigger our ancestral brains and totally bypass our natural defenses. And that leads us to a concept pioneered by food scientists, most notably Dr. Howard Moskowitz, called the bliss point. You see, human enjoyment of food follows this inverted U-shaped curve. Too little sugar and the food tastes kind of like cardboard. Too much and it becomes nauseatingly sweet, so you stop eating. The bliss point sits perfectly at the absolute peak of that curve. It is the exact optimized concentration of sugar, fat, and salt that maximizes that dopamine release in your brain without ever triggering your satiety alarm, that little internal voice that tells you you've had enough. We actually know all about this deliberate optimization thanks to some brilliant investigative reporting by journalists like Michael Moss, the author of Salt, Sugar, Fat. Moss's research lays out exactly how major food corporations use this exact science to optimize flavor profiles. They aren't just cooking up food, they are literally engineering irresistible sensory experiences in a lab, specifically designed to hook that evolutionary dopamine engine we were just talking about. A really crucial part of this sensory hacking is something called vanishing caloric density. Think about foods like cheese puffs or those super thin potato chips. They're specifically engineered to melt incredibly fast on your tongue. And because they vanish so quickly, your brain literally gets tricked. It registers zero accumulating calories in your stomach. Because of this, your leptin response, which is your body's natural fullness switch, it just fails to activate entirely. You could eat 1,000 calories of chips, and your biology will still scream that your stomach is empty. Crazy, right? Moving on to part 3, the dopamine trap. There is a really stark contrast happening inside your body right now. When you eat whole foods, your brain maintains a nice, steady dopamine baseline, and your body gets the essential nutrients and fiber it actually needs to function. But ultra-processed foods, they do the exact opposite. They spike your system with artificial dopamine and massive surges of insulin. But because they lack real fiber and micronutrients, your physical cells remain quite literally starved of actual nutrition. This is the ultimate metabolic trap. You are constantly consuming energy, but your cells are starving, leaving you fiercely hungry again just 60 minutes later. And I want to be super clear here, this isn't just dramatic hyperbole. This is firmly backed by clinical research. Dr. Ashley Gearhardt, who created the Yale Food Addiction Scale, has shown that ultra-processed foods meet the actual clinical criteria for addiction. They hijack our brain's reward pathways in a highly aggressive way that natural, whole foods simply do not, and honestly cannot do. So because of this aggressive hijacking, your brain has to defend itself. It does this through something called receptor downregulation. When you subject your brain to an overwhelming influx of artificial dopamine, basically a super stimulus from these engineered foods, your brain protects itself by actively turning down the sensitivity of its dopamine receptors. Think about it. A natural strawberry hasn't changed its flavor profile in thousands of years. But because your baseline for reward has been artificially recalibrated by hyper-palatable snacks, suddenly that natural strawberry or a whole avocado tastes incredibly boring and unappealing to you. Let's wrap things up with part 4, resetting your biology. Okay, so the very first thing you have to do to reclaim control is stop blaming your character. Stop blaming your lack of discipline. You are not lazy. You are a Paleolithic animal attempting to survive in a hyper-engineered food laboratory. You can't just willpower your way out of a biological trap in 10 minutes when a craving hits. But what you can do is change your environment. By deliberately reducing ultra-processed foods in your pantry, you give your brain the breathing room it desperately needs. Over time, those downregulated dopamine receptors will gradually reset. And as they do, you're going to experience the amazing sensation of real, natural food tasting vibrant, sweet, and genuinely satisfying all over again. I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. You didn't fail the test. The test was completely rigged from the start. You simply weren't designed to resist a food system engineered by brilliant scientists trying to exploit your most primal survival instincts. But now that you can see the strings pulling at your biology, now that you truly understand the trap, you hold the absolute power to break the cycle. The only question left is, will you? Thank you so much for exploring this with me, and I hope this knowledge empowers your next choice.